Well, the indie minds at Studio A24 have come up with another horror film. They brought us The Witch, Hereditary, Green Room, a lot of others. Let's talk about Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my spoiler-free review for the new horror film in theaters right now called Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I mentioned the studio behind it, A24. I don't usually talk about the studio unless it's like Disney or something, but I think it definitely plays a factor into what I'm going to be talking about with this review. But before I get to the plot and my review of Bodies, 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 I want to welcome you into Dan Reviews It. Thanks for finding this video. You'll find plenty of movie and TV reviews on my channel to peruse, and please consider subscribing as well. We'd love to have you aboard as one of my subscribers. So let's talk about this movie. A couple of people you will probably know, well, certainly Pete Davidson you'll know, but Amandla Stenberg is in this as well, who was in The Hate U Give, and she's done a bunch of movies over the years. She was Rue in the Hunger Games movie when she was, much littler. But basically the plot is this group of friends who are, I would say, in their mid-20s, maybe younger. They're definitely not playing like teenagers here, but they are all invited to this hurricane party at a mansion, and when the power goes out, the group ends up sort of playing a couple of games that go a bit awry, and they end up playing this like murder mystery game, and real murder happens because this is a horror movie. So that's really, I guess, all I can tell you without being too spoilery about the particular events. But yeah, Pete Davidson is featured in this movie. He is, I would say, the most famous person involved. Some of the other people I'm not real familiar with. They may have done some. Well, Maria Balaklava was in the Borat movie, so you may recognize her from that. I think that's all she's really done in English. Other than that. And this was directed by Helena Rejen, who is a first-time English director. This is her first fully English movie that she has directed. She's acted in a few here or there, but in terms of directing, yeah. So I really have a love-hate relationship with this Studio A24. I think they have come up with some of the best indie movies in the last 10 or 15 years, including some Oscar nominees, some Oscar winners. Room is one of them with the great Brie Larson. Lady Bird was another one. Saoirse Ronan was in that, and some nominations for that one as well. And even dipping back, a little bit further into their filmography, with some sci-fi projects, Ex Machina being one of them. And they also did the great Adam Sandler movie Uncut Gems, which should have been Oscar nominated and wasn't. But a couple of their very first movies are some of my least favorite of the last decade. Spring Breakers and The Bling Ring. These movies are both about spoiled, rich a-holes that I don't give a crap about doing whatever they're doing in the movie. In The Bling Ring, they're thieves. In Spring Breakers, they go down to Florida, and James Franco's got dreads, and it's very stupid. But this movie, I think, is right in line with those. This falls very dramatically, I think, from some of their other horror pictures. The Green Room is probably my favorite of theirs. Hereditary was also very good. I have mixed feelings about The Witch and Midsummer, but, critically they were big hits, so obviously some people loved it. But look, critically this is a big hit too. It's in the high 80s on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score a little bit lower than that, but I am certainly lower than both of those. And let me tell you why. So basically, it does take that sort of template from The Bling Ring and Spring Breakers, which, listen, were mildly successful, and they were early films in the studio's history, so it makes sense that you'd want to maybe go back to that well. But the problem with this movie is really none of the characters are likable. Maybe the one gal who, comes from a poor home, well, I shouldn't say poor, middle class, but poor compared to these people, these rich mansion people. Okay, so she's, middle class, let's say. But she is, I would say, the most likable one, most sympathetic one, most relatable one. But that's about it. They've built this whole movie around a bunch of people who I couldn't stand. I wanted them all to die in the first couple of scenes, especially the Pete Davidson character. Now, listen, I can take or leave Pete Davidson on SNL. I really enjoyed his movie, The King of Staten Island. But for the most part, I don't think he's got a ton of talent. I mean, King of Staten Island, he was essentially playing himself. Here, he is the biggest jerk probably of the whole bunch. Is that playing to, something he knows a little bit about? Maybe, I don't know. But he is, I think, very one note. And it's why his characters on SNL never really broke out. His big things on SNL, other than the Chad, the idiot model or whatever, was him doing his own kind of stuff as himself on Weekend Update. I think that's sort of where his lane is, and this kind of, I think, feeds into that. So, look, I'm not a kind of person that watches the Kardashians. None of that stuff remotely even interests me. And that is basically this whole movie. And the other thing is, we get so much time with the characters at the beginning. The horror stuff doesn't really take place for a long while. Probably, I would say, almost half the movie, at least a half hour into the movie. And it's only like a 93-minute movie or something like that. So it takes a good third of just trying to get to know these characters. But the problem is I didn't want to get to know them. I didn't like them, and their conversations weren't helping. Which leads me to another issue, which is the script. Because basically, this is supposed to be, it's billed as a horror comedy. It's not to me. I didn't think any of it was funny. I didn't laugh at any of it. Now, from a satirical standpoint, okay, maybe we're riffing a little bit on the Gen Z stuff, and we're sort of satirizing that as opposed to just sort of telling jokes. And honestly, some of the things they were saying and doing in the movie, I could say, okay, yeah, that's something I can see, my Gen Z coworkers or my nephews or whatever, talking about or saying. But just having them say it, where's the punch there? Where's the riffing? Where's the actual satire? Just having them do it, well, that's not satire. That's just you saying, showing us what they're like. But you're not satirizing. You're not being clever about any of it. And it's as if somebody just kind of fed into a machine. Oh, here's what Gen Z people talk about, and here's what they say, and here's how they act. And then they just spit it up onto the screen. Didn't do it for me at all. Now, the one, there's a couple positives that I'll say. I think I've said enough about the negatives. But I would say that as the murder itself actually, gears up, and we're actually now, okay, it's not to be spoilery, but it's a horror movie where people get killed. Once, people start getting killed, it's like, okay, now I'm actually kind of intrigued about where it's going. And by the end of it, I would say, I don't know if I was satisfied with it as a movie, but certainly that last 40 minutes, let's say, was actually not bad. But it was the entire hour or so leading up to that I could have done completely without. So yeah, this really falls back into that Spring Breaker Bling Ring type category. The music is this obnoxious club music that a lot of A24 movies do. In this sort of genre. Not so much the dramas, not things like Lady Bird or Room, but things like this that are certainly geared towards a younger audience. And I admit, maybe I'm not the target demo. I'm in my 40s here. Probably Gen Z is the target, I guess, even though it's supposedly skewering Gen X. I don't know. It didn't make a lot of sense in that regard either. The movie stinks. It's not as bad as Spring Breakers. And because of the horror stuff actually working for me in the last 40 minutes or so of the movie, I'm definitely not going to fail it like I did Spring Breakers. But it's just probably a shade above some of those other horror movies I've reviewed this year, like Firestarter and They/Them. I will leave Bodies with a D+. The fact that this has an 88% on Rotten makes me feel like it's one of these movies where critics are just a little afraid to be the outlier and say, oh yeah, this movie actually isn't very good. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. But certainly check out The Green Room instead if you want some really good horror from A24. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Dan Reviews It. Bye.